up, it's Steve from the old Yorkshire Geek, and as you may have guessed, that there and that there, we've got a bit of Star Trek going on. So, this is the best Star Trek transporter mishap episodes that we're looking at today. This is from Giant Freaking Robot. As usual, the link's down there. So, and all the usual palaver. I'm hitting the microphone. Who cares? I'm having a microphone mishap. Right, so let's get this article up and let's have a look at it. If I can find it. There we go. Uh-oh. It's not appearing. Why is it not appearing? Let's start again. Properties. Right, we're there. Right, the best Star Trek transporter mishap episodes. We talk about the best of Star Trek's transporter mishap episodes. And there you see, there's Scotty, Captain Montgomery Scott, the Captain of Engineering, and Jean-Luc Picard in the holodeck recreation of the Enterprise, the original Enterprise bridge, which you can see there. In the episode, the TNG Next Generation episode, Relics from the 6th season. Anyway, just as Star Trek wouldn't be the same without the technology Gene Roddenberry and the subsequent creators imagined, it wouldn't be the same without the stories about that fantastic tech going sideways. For example, there's episodes about Star Trek's transporters malfunctioning and transporting heroes to different times, transporting them to different universes, and sometimes creating brand new, bizarre life. And there's quite a lot of them, to be honest. They're only given us 7 examples here, but there are others, which I'll try and remember off the top of my head. Anyway, here for your consideration are our choices for the best Star Trek transporter mishap episodes. Or is it Mishap? I know it's mishap. Right, number 7. Second Chances, Star Trek The Next Generation. 8 years before the events of this Season 6 Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Will Riker, Jonathan Frakes, steps onto a transporter pad. I think he was a lieutenant then, wasn't he? You can see that there. Not knowing that getting beamed off the surface of Nervala 4 would inadvertently create a duplicate of himself. The strange event forces Riker to confront his past in a very real way, specifically in terms of his willingness to abandon his earlier romance with Deanna Troi, Marina Sirtis, for the sake of his career. What happened? He had something to do on this planet. I can't remember what ship he were on at the time. But anyway, and to beam him up, they're all interference in the atmosphere, and they'd got everybody else out, but then he was the last one, and they beamed him up, but something happened in the atmosphere, and basically the transporter beam, as well as beaming up to the ship successfully, also reflected the transporter signal back down to the planet, so he rematerialised back there as well, thinking something had gone wrong, and then obviously the ship, they'd got there right, and they were fine. They buggered off, and he didn't understand why he were abandoned there for 8 years. Anyway, naming himself Thomas Riker, the transporter duplicate returned in a Season 3 episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine as an antagonist and member of the Maquis. The last we see of him, he's made a prisoner by the Cardassians. His ultimate fate is never revealed, but the most likely outcome is that he was executed by the Dominion, along with the rest of the captured Maquis when they took over Cardassia. Yes, that's probably entirely what happened during the Dominion War. But yes, so that's another. This is an episode that makes you think about what happens to you when you go through the transporter beam. People always mention this. Does it kill you and then recreate you at the other end? Are you essentially a real person, or are you just? I mean, we all are just balls of energy, really, aren't we? And the transporter finds a way to sort of like make that solid energy less solid and then become more solid again. It's all computers, isn't it? And patterns and signals. It's all ones and zeros, basically. Anyway, so that's that one. Number 6, Tuvix, Star Trek Voyager. I don't like this episode because I don't know. It's a sad one, to be honest. But also, I don't like Tuvix, so I'm kind of glad when what happens to him. Anyway, in what remains one of the most controversial Star Trek episodes among fans, a trip through the transporter merges the Vulcan security chief Tuvok, Tim Russ, with the Talaxian morale officer and ambassador and lots of others, Neelix, Ethan Phillips, to make a brand new person, Tuvix, Tom Wright. It takes the crew of Voyager a few weeks to figure out how to safely separate Tuvok and Neelix, by which point Tuvix has made friends, worked with the crew, and sees himself as an individual distinct from either the Vulcan or the Talaxian. To bring Tuvok and Neelix back, he argues, would mean murdering Tuvix. Fans still debate about whether or not, when Captain Janeway Kate Mulgrew brings Tuvok and Neelix back, it's a surgery or an execution. Well, it's a bit of both, really, isn't it? But, as Tuvok would say, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. You've got two people in one body, but then this new person decides he wants to remain as this merged individual, but then, Janeway, as the captain, she's got to make a decision, hasn't she? And they think, she thinks they'd be better off with, how they were before, with Tuvok and Neelix separated. So, but like I said, towards the end, I don't like how Tuvix kind of begs for his life, essentially. It's not a thing that I don't think either Neelix or Tuvok would do. Particularly Tuvok. Like I say, he would say the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Anyway, moving on. Our man Bashir, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Another episode I'm not keen on, to be honest. I'm not a huge fan of holodeck episodes. Obviously there are exceptions, but I'm not a fan of this one. Star Trek Deep Space Nine had significantly fewer holodeck mishap episodes than its contemporaries TNG and Voyager, but in Season 4's Our Man Bashir, it makes up for the absence by combining a holodeck mishap story with a transporter mishap story. While Julian Bashir, Alexander Siddig, remember when he used to be Siddig El Fadil? That was I think the first couple of seasons he was that. Anyway, happens to be enjoying his James Bond fantasy programme in the holosuite, a runabout explodes and the transporter patterns of the runabout's crew are stored in the holosuite because it's the only place on the station with the memory to bear it. Consequently, DS9 regulars like Kira, Nana Visitor, Worf, Michael Dorn, and even Ben Sisko, Avery Brooks, take on the roles of characters in Bashir's programme. Our man Bashir not only gives Star Trek fans a great transporter mishap episode, but a wonderful nod to the heyday of 007, not to mention an important step in the development of Bashir's character. I'm not a huge fan of this episode, to be completely honest. But I suppose it's a bit of fun. Another one that I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not a huge fan of time travel stories either. I'm such an old curmudgeon, aren't I? Number 4, Past Tense, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The 21st century is a dark time in Star Trek lore, and the transporter mishap sends Ben Sisko, Julian Bashir, and Jadzia Dax, Terry Farrell, back to that the lovely Terry Farrell, gorgeous, back to that difficult time in the two-parter Past Tense. The story finds Bashir and Sisko struggling among the most impoverished of San Francisco citizens, while Jadzia finds herself a guest of Chris Brinner, Jim Metzler, one of the city's wealthiest men. With the bleak-looking 21st century looking much more like the real world than the utopia the heroes are trying to get back to, Past Tense is a cold splash of water for anyone hoping we'll one day achieve what the fictional people of the Federation have. There's also an example of how you can change the timeline. Because that happens in this episode. They go back, and I can't remember what year it is. Does it say? No, it doesn't say. I think it's 2025 or something like that, or 2027. And there's a thing called the Bell Riots, which is like sparked by a man called Gabriel Bell, who Sisko kind of assumes his role. I think the real Gabriel Bell, I think he might die. I can't actually remember what happens. Inadvertently because of their appearance. As I said, I think I've only seen that's a two-part. I've only seen it once because I'm not a huge fan of this one. But he kind of assumes the role of Gabriel Bell, and because he kind of looks like him, in that they both have heads, and he's got to make sure that the Bell riots happen, so as not to contaminate the timeline. But when they get back to the 24th century, and he looks it up in the history files, and the photo of Gabriel Bell is a photo of Ben Sisko, so it's changed the timeline. They'd seen a photo previously, and it's not him. Anyway, so as I've said before, with this Strange New Worlds thing that's going on and changing the timeline, it happens quite a lot in Star Trek. Right, number 3, Relics. Probably my favourite one. My favourite one of transporter mishaps. Although it's not really a mishap. It's an engineering jiggery pokery. Right, Relics, Star Trek The Next Generation. It's a great episode. I watch this actually quite regularly. It's one of my favourite ones. We're kind of cheating here because this classic Star Trek crossover doesn't come about because of a Star Trek mishap, so much as a transporter working better than anyone ever expected. When the Enterprise responds to a distress call from a ship that's been missing for 75 years, they run into Captain Montgomery's Scott, James Doohan, who kept himself alive by keeping his pattern cycling in the transporter buffers, though sadly his colleague Matt Franklin is lost. Probably because it needed more energy to keep this fat get-go stored in the buffer. I bet Matt Franklin was like a bloody rake. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but, just saying. Relics is a fantastic episode of Star Trek. It not only gives us one of our few chances to see a character from the original series interact with the cast of The Next Generation, but it tells a moving story about the elderly being made to feel irrelevant. It's not made to feel irrelevant. It's kind of getting under Geordie LaForge's feet, in an old person kind of way. Geordie's busy, he's got a lot of work to do, and Scotty keeps interfering, pressing buttons basically, opening up the lithium crystal chamber, whatever the hell it's called, matrix, and stuff like that. Actually shuts the engines down for a while because of him doing that. And Geordie kind of gets a bit short with him, but they eventually become friends at the end, and everything works out fine. And then he buggers off in a shuttle, and there's Scotty. We never know what's happened to him. He'll have popped up in comics. I think he's in that new one, that with Cisco on the USS Theseus, but, that doesn't count. Right, number 2, Drone, Star Trek Voyager. It's another one I quite like, this one, to be honest. It's not too bad. In this later episode of Star Trek Voyager, the transporter patterns of the Doctor, Robert Picardo, and 7 of 9, Jerry Ryan, briefly merge, causing the 29th century technology of the Doctor's hollow emitter to interact with 7's Borg nanoprobes, ultimately creating a new Borg. The new Borg, named One, played by J. Paul Boehmer, unintentionally becomes a threat when the collective learns about him and comes calling with the hopes of assimilating his vastly superior technology. One makes the choice that settles things himself, and his solution makes Drone one of the most heartbreaking episodes of the series. Yes, it's a good one, because you see 7 of 9 becomes attached to him, and gets all emotional at the end. He basically, I think he commits suicide and takes a Borg cube out with him and stuff. I can't actually remember, to be honest, but it's a decent episode. And number 1, Mirror Mirror, Star Trek The Original Series, the original transporter mishap. Of course, you had to know this was coming. It was the original Star Trek that was home to the most impactful transporter mishap tale. Mirror Mirror, which introduced us to the Dark Mirror universe because of an anomaly. Kirk, William Shatner, Scotty, James Doohan, Uhura, Nichelle Nichols, and McCoy DeForest Kelly find themselves in a parallel universe in which the benevolent United Federation of Planets is replaced with the brutal Terran Empire. The Mirror Universe would prove popular enough that it was brought back for DS9, Enterprise, and in particular was heavily mined in Star Trek Discovery. And there we go. But there were other transporter mishap episodes. The Reg Barclay one, Realm of Fear, where he was terrified of the transporters, Reg Barclay, in The Next Generation. So in Realm of Fear, he has to go transport to wherever. But while he's in there, he just coincidentally happens to see life forms, well, he thinks they're life forms, in the transporter beam, which turns out to be a crew that's lost in the pattern buffer, or lost in the transporter whatever. It's an episode I'm not entirely fond of, because I've always thought when you're transporting, you're not aware of anything. But he's there in the transporter beam looking around, and I thought you were frozen in place, so that the computer knew where every part of you was. I think it's called the annular confinement beam, which basically holds you in place. It counts all your cells and atoms and then transports you and then reassembles you at the other end, or recreates you at the other end, depending what you believe how the transporter works. So he shouldn't have really been doing all this stuff. He actually grabs hold of one in the episode, and that's how we learn it's not a monster, it's a person that he's grabbed hold of. It's not one of the best episodes, but it's another transporter-based episode. What others is there? Obviously, there's the DS9 ones where they use the transporters to go to the mirror universe quite regularly. Think of another. I can't think of any more off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a million more. There's a terrible transporter mishap in Star Trek The Motion Picture, where Commander Sonak and another commander who used to be an admiral, I've forgotten the name, she was the partner, she was a love interest for Admiral Kirk, and she'd taken according to the novel, this is in the novel, it doesn't say it in the film, in the novel, she'd taken a grade reduction to serve on the Enterprise, and obviously they both get killed when the transporter malfunctions. What else is there? No, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. Let's have a little think. Transporter stuff. Oh, I can't think of any more. Nah. I'm blanking, obviously. Right, so we'll leave it there. So just, a quick look at transporter mishaps. So I just thought that'd be fun to do. Right, so we'll leave it there. So thanks for watching, wherever you are. Look after each other, and until next time, I'll say thee.